Wonderful. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to see you all today. Good morning. It is Wednesday, the 17th of April, and we are joined today by the wonderful Jasmine for our Ask the Expert session. She is from Cancer Hair Care, and we will be discussing all things hair loss and hair care during cancer treatment. So I will hand over to Jasmine to give a little introduction today.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Hi, it's lovely to see you all. Thanks for that introduction. Just to let you know a little bit about myself and why I've got the pleasure of spending some time with you this morning. So I'm Jasmine Julia Gupta, and I'm the founder of the charity Cancer Hair Care. Now, I haven't had cancer and I haven't had hair loss, and people often ask me why I founded a charity. I'm a specialist hairdresser. I've been hairdressing for 34 years now, and for 20 of those, I've specialised in cancer treatment related hair loss. And I remember right at the beginning of my journey, I met a lovely, very young lady. She was 22 and she was pregnant throughout the whole of her chemotherapy treatment. She gave birth to a really healthy baby, which is lovely. And she came along and we supported her throughout her journey and learnt so much actually. So it was things like when she went into her pregnancy kind of reviews and she was hair free and she was too hot to wear a wig. How could she do that? So together, what we do at Cancer Hair Care is we really look at the kind of finite details of everybody's individual journey. What can we do? How can we be a helpful hand? And where is it that you want to kind of bust those myths from? So, as a founder of the charity at Cancer Hair Care, we're here for you for the entirety of your hair loss and hopefully new hair growth journey. And that's what we're here to do, that very one subject, everything to do with hair loss, scalp care, hair care. We've got a fantastic team of about 27 hairdressers who will be delighted to talk to you for an hour about what mousse you want to use on new hair growth. So please just bear that in mind, because quite often in these sessions we cover a lot of topics that may or might not be applicable right now, but at any time in your journey, you can always get in touch.
Wonderful.
Back
Thank you
over to
so
you,
much,
Lauren.
Jasmine. That's great. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. So a little bit about the structure of today. We have come up with a number of questions that we're going to be asking Jasmine. These questions have been gathered from conversations with our mums or conversations that have been had on the forum. So we're going to present them to you today, Jasmine, to get your wonderful advice and expertise. So the first question we have is, some of our mums worry about the impact that their hair loss will have on their children. Can you speak to us about how they could support and talk to their children about their hair loss?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking to kids, whatever age, can really, really vary, can't it? So we have a number of free resources which have been therapeutically developed. So let me show you some of those ideas. So you can request these. These are children's play cards, and there's lots of different characters. We used to call it happy heads, but what we learned actually is that it's not really ideal to tell children to how they should feel about, mum's hair loss, for example. So we called it Crown Club, because it just feels more appropriate to be replacing that hair and putting something else, albeit a crown or a hat. So there's lots of different characters with different skin colours, different abilities, different disabilities, different hats and headwear. So this is Bertie Busy Beanie, for example, and this is Florence Flower Hat. So there's lots of different characters. There's 6 different characters, and there's these cut and make sheets. So I don't know if anybody did these types of things when you were perhaps a kid, but it's a really lovely playful activity that works with children of all ages. We actually have teenagers who will cut these out and kind of stick them on the windows and things like that. But obviously it's geared up to really children 10 and under. But it's a great way to just play something through. And it may be that, your own child isn't of that age yet, but it may be that you've got family members, nieces, nephews, little people in your life, or perhaps you're a teacher at work, that kind of thing. So you can just get in contact with Cancer Hair Care and request some children's play sheets, or we can send it to you in a PDF and you can print it off yourself. So that's one way that can be really helpful. I think what we're pointing to as well is those non-verbal things, playing something through. One lady who had children, she had 3 children under 5 years of age when she had her treatment. And I'm going to show you something in a moment that we developed following her story. And she got up one morning and she decided today was the day when she was going to go and shave all her hair off and go to the wig shop. So she went to the wig shop, they shaved her hair off, and she had such an excellent wig. It replicated her hair. She hadn't told her children, she hadn't told her partner. And she went home, and her little 2.5-year-old was in her arms and accidentally pulled off the wig. And it really floored both her partner and her children. And she said to me, "But Jasmine, how do you explain to a child that young?" So we set ourselves to a task, and the end result is what I'm going to show you now. So these are our hair loss dollies. They are so beautiful, and they come in all different. Oh, her hat's wonky. Look, sorry about that. She might complain. They come in all different shapes and sizes, as do us humans. So you can request skin colours, or you can see what comes along. And what's unique about them is they turn inside out. So one side they're hair free, and they come with little hats and wigs, and the other side they've got hair. So this one is a redhead, and then on this one she turns inside out, and she's got great afro hair, just really beautiful textured hair. And this is the way that you can have that lovely non-verbal conversation with a young child and just playing it through. And what's really interesting is that sometimes it's really good to speak through the doll. So you can actually say, "Oh, you know what? Mummy's not feeling very well today. Oh, she's being sick. Oh dear, poor mummy. Put those toys away. Oh, she's a bit grumpy as well. Oh dear. Let's give her a hat. I don't want that hat. Oh, okay. Let's let her have a nap. She'll probably feel better when she wakes up." And it's really great, you know. And we kind of, people have told us, "Oh my goodness, I've never done that before." And it's just that really lovely way. And people often tell us that what happens is when the child wants to talk about something or is worried, the dolly comes out. So they're really beautifully made. We've got 102 gorgeous volunteer knitters, most of who have all had a cancer and hair loss journey themselves. We still need more knitters. So if anybody's out there and wants to knit for us, you'd be very welcome. Get in touch. And these dolls go all around the country. And it's just another way that you can make sure that you can have that kind of non-verbal conversation really in a playful way. So all you do is just get in touch with Cancer Hair Care. "Please, can I have a hair loss doll?" If you've got any special requests, a particular colour your kids like, we'll do our absolute best to match them, or a hair texture or skin colour. We'll really do our very best. There's a lot, the dollies come in amazing shapes and sizes. If not, you can just request one and we'll send them. It's often helpful to tell us the age of the children because the dolls come in different sizes. Every dolly comes with a safety certificate. They're all completely checked for small parts, health and safety and things like that. So hopefully when it arrives in a beautiful organza bag, you can just rest assured that that's a really helpful tool for you.
Oh, Jasmine, that's wonderful. The dolls look gorgeous.
They're
That's
so
great.
beautiful, aren't they? And you know
Yeah.
what? When we're in hospitals, quite often we'll have 3 or 4 in stock. And somebody comes in and they say, "Oh, I'd like one of those dolls." And so many times we pull them out. And sometimes the ladies that knit them name them with a tag on it. Sometimes it has the person's name on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? So there's lots of mysteries in the world, and those little dollies are part of that mystery, I like to think.
Oh, that's lovely. I love that. Thank you. I think we're going to hand over to Sarah now for our next question.
Hi, Jasmine. Thank you for that. So could you just explain to us why cancer treatment can cause hair loss, and are there any measures that our mums could take to potentially reduce or prevent the hair loss?
That's a really good question. So, first and foremost, different treatments for cancer can cause hair loss in different ways. So, when it comes to chemotherapy, which is probably the most commonly known way of hair falling out, it's really important to know that not all chemotherapy causes hair loss. Sometimes chemotherapy can cause hair thinning, and sometimes it says hair loss. So, often people come in and watch something like this or attend something like this right at the beginning of the journey, and they're not sure fully what their treatment plan is. So do speak to your nurse and just really make sure, ask those questions. Will my treatment or my chemotherapy cause hair loss? What we're going to do is we're just going to briefly think about the different types of treatments and how they affect the hair. And you know what, this is a bit technical, so it's good it's in the morning. But I really believe that, and I can't think of a better word other than empowerment, actually. But when we share information, it makes making decisions all throughout your cancer journey much easier, because there's so many myths about what happens to hair. It took me 7 years of research to really do a deep dive in with dermatologists, trichologists, oncologists, anybody with an ist in their name was involved. But I'm really confident now that this information that we're providing is the most up-to-date, efficient kind of explanation. So if we just think about hair functioning normally, and if we think about hair growing on the scalp, what happens is, on average, you have around 120,000 or more individual hair follicles on the scalp. Now, what happens is these follicles are kind of like a U shape, like a bulb, and the blood supply ordinarily brings them oxygen, nutrients, and a waste system. And they're amazing little cells, actually, and each one is a cell in its own right. So ordinarily, your root is established, your hair starts to grow and then peek out from the scalp layer, and it just continues to grow and grow and grow and get longer and longer and longer until it naturally goes into what we call a transitional phase before it falls out. And this is so key to cancer treatments. So when it's ready to naturally fall out, one of two things will happen. Either it's just part of its natural process and it starts to shift up the follicle over about 10 to 14 days, or there's another hair growing already underneath and it's almost pushing that hair out. So 10 to 14 days, it travels up the follicle, which it will then naturally come off the hair when you brush it, when you wash it, or whatever happens. That's the natural process. And then that system, for some people, the hair will already be there. It will be growing very quickly. For others, it takes around 3 months to reboot. That's the normal regrowth system. And that means that what happens is over 95% of those hairs are just in that active growing stage. And that's why we can blow dry, style, cut, colour, do whatever we want to with our hair ordinarily without a problem. So what happens is those under 5% that are falling out naturally are normally randomised. So that's why you don't get big clumps of hair loss in one particular area, for example. So that's the normal process of things. So now let's think about what happens with different cancer treatments. So chemotherapy, the moment that goes into the blood system with a chemo that's going to cause hair thinning or hair loss, what happens is it temporarily but immediately shuts off access to that follicle so that it just can't function. So it doesn't get the oxygen, the nutrients, and the waste system, and it's instant. But then why doesn't the hair fall out straight away? That's because, unlike in like a Netflix movie or something, you know, when they show a cancer journey, someone has treatment and then within 24 hours, they've got a hair-free, shiny head. And we all know it's not like that, folks, is it? It can be a messy business. And that's because what happens is it sends it into the natural falling out phase, but not 100% of the follicles at the same time. So 10 to 14 days, it's shifting up. And often people say around day 7, before the hair starts to fall, the hair feels really irritable, can be a little bit itchy. For about 50% of people, it can be painful. I'm not saying that to scare anyone, but your nursing professionals will say take some painkillers that are appropriate for you. Some people with young kids have said they thought they had head lice, and we all dread that, don't we, folks? That kind of crawling feeling on the scalp, and it's basically that hair's on the edge. It's about to tip out, and there's thousands of them about to depart. So that's basically what happens with chemotherapy. So what we expect is around day 7 after your first chemo, you might start to feel the shift. Between about 10 to 14 days after your first one, a lot of people will see 40 to 60% shift. And then often it's not until the next round of chemo that the rest tends to go. So it can be frustrating. When it comes to chemotherapy, the only way to try and to reduce that hair loss is to have something called scalp cooling. And that's where you will wear something called a cold cap to try to minimize hair loss. It doesn't fully prevent it, but it can, for some people, be very successful. It's very individual, and the only way to really know is to test it out for yourself. It does make treatment longer, so you have to wear that cold cap before, during, and for some time after your chemo. Now, the main leading manufacturer is called Paxman, and they have an excellent website. They actually have a scalp cooling calculator where you can pop in the brand of your chemotherapy along with the amount that you're having, and it will try and give you a gauge on how successful that type of treatment is with scalp cooling. So it can help to make that decision for some people. Over at Cancer Hair Care, we've got about 13 videos, completely independent, some made with manufacturers, some made independently, so that we can just give you that hand-holding experience, and you can talk to our team anytime about scalp cooling. Now, scalp cooling only works with chemotherapy, and it doesn't work with all chemotherapies. So it's one of those things that you need to have a chat with your nurse about. Is it suitable for your type of cancer? It's normally suitable for all solid tumours. Does your hospital provide it? If your hospital doesn't provide it and it's important to you, you have the right to ask if within your trust, or if you're in Wales within your health board, if there's a hospital within that trust or board that you can go and have your treatment at. So scalp cooling, folks, is a big topic on its own. So I would say that at any time, do look across the Cancer Hair Care website. We've got lots of links that will be helpful, and come in and have a conversation. So that's chemotherapy. When it causes hair thinning, which is a bit of a weird one, really, because what does that mean? What can you expect? When you see cancer treatments say hair thinning, what we normally mean is that we don't expect the whole of the hair to go. So you could liken that to postpartum hair thinning a little bit, if some of you have experienced that, where, you know, it tends to be typically round the edges of the hairline on top here, really frustrating, and it's unpredictable where it will be falling out. It also tends to grow alongside falling out, which can be weird to think, oh, it fell out there and I can feel short bits already. Sometimes people think the hair has snapped. If it's very short, it's going to be new hair growth. The hair also can become a bit brittler, so you can get a bit of breakage when there's hair thinning as well. So that's chemotherapy. Radiotherapy, if you're being treated on the neck and head up area, you might be being treated somewhere else in your body. So, for example, if you've got breast cancer and you'll be having radiotherapy, that will be around the underarm and the breast area. So you might not be worried about any kind of underarm hair going there or something like that. But when it comes to being treated, say for a brain tumor or something like that, when it comes to radiotherapy, hair loss is what we call in the surrounding areas. So external beam radiotherapy is a technique where, for example, if you're being treated for a tumor in the jaw, the beam might come in here, and if you're female and you're not obviously not worried about facial hair or something like that, you might not be worried about the entrance area, but the exit might be out the back here, and you might have an area of hair loss there. If you're being treated over the whole head, that might cause hair loss across the whole head. So any type of radiotherapy, you want to ask your medical team, the area that I'm being treated in, am I going to lose any hair? And how big an area of hair loss is that going to be? That's a really, really important question, because sometimes an area is shaved in preparation to do that radiotherapy, but actually there's only an area, say a 10p piece, going to be treated. That's that specific area where we're thinking about hair loss could happen, and any possible exit areas. So get them to draw on a piece of paper how big that treatment area is going to be, so that you can be really clear about that. But it causes hair loss in a different way. So what happens is we call it top-down hair loss. So unfortunately, when it causes hair loss, it does cause some damage. So sometimes the hair can snap or break off, unfortunately, or it can damage the skin, which means sometimes the follicle can be eradicated away. Now, we are finding that doses of radiotherapy really make a difference depending on whether or not someone's hair will grow back. With chemotherapy, we always expect and plan for hair to grow back. There may be some problem areas for some people, but we always plan for it technically. With radiotherapy, sometimes it is permanent in a particular area. So when we talk about new hair growth, you'll notice that the timelines are very different. It can take up to 9 months for any hair to show after radiotherapy, whereas chemo, it's within 3 months. So that's the difference, folks, because it can cause some skin damage there. So that's radiotherapy. And then for things like hormonal therapies, that can sometimes cause hair thinning. Now, if you've started with a full head of hair, hormonal therapies tend to cause hair thinning gradually over 2 to 3 months. And it's very similar to postpartum hair thinning, so it seems to be more gradual, or It's that type of thinning that sometimes people have a ponytail and they say, I used to have to use a really thick band and now I use a smaller one, but I can't really see where that hair loss is. For other people, they kind of say, oh, it's definitely this area or that area. So it's somewhat unpredictable, but we wouldn't expect all of the hair to go. And when it comes to other treatments such as immunotherapy and things like that, we don't often plan the hair loss to be commonly related to things like immunotherapy. So it's a case of looking at the side effects and asking staff, is there any chance of hair thinning or hair loss? So I hope that's given a bit of an overview. And obviously, if you're having surgery in an area, that also can cause a certain type of hair loss. So it's quite varied, isn't it? Depending on what treatment somebody has. So hopefully what we've done is we've had a look at why hair falls out, how it grows ordinarily, and any prevention techniques, which is only with chemotherapy, that scalp cooling. I guess the last thing to just think about on that topic really is when it comes to hair thinning and hair loss, I just want to bust one very essential myth. Cutting hair doesn't affect how the hair grows. So when we cut the hair on the head, there's no signal sent to the follicle to say you've been clippered off or you've been cut off with scissors, and therefore it doesn't influence how the hair grows back. And I think it's really important to know, so it should be down to your own personal choice if you choose to clipper it off or if you choose to cut it off. And we've got lots of guides on the Cancer Hair Care website how to do that. And last but not least, before we move on to our next topic, with chemotherapy, anywhere on the body that hair can grow, it can also be lost. So that can include eyebrows, lashes, facial hair, and body hair. So that's the thing about chemotherapy. It affects kind of hair loss globally, if you like.
That was great. Thank you so much, Jasmine. I just wanted to, we had a comment from one of our mums in the chat, and she said, I didn't even think of a cold cap and it wasn't mentioned by my specialist team. And I think I just accepted I would lose my hair. Now, that was very similar for me as well. So I had my experience 10 years ago, and I was told that I would lose my hair when I went through chemotherapy. But a cold cap was never mentioned to me. Now, I don't know if that's because of the type of chemotherapy that I was having. So is that how it works? There are some chemotherapies where a cold cap just wouldn't be appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally speaking, if you have a blood cancer, it's not appropriate to have scalp cooling. So it's contraindicated. It's and they don't feel that that's always a good idea. There are lots of advances actually, and Paxman, who are that leading manufacturer, are really kind of leading the way, because there are some different types of cancer that formerly beforehand wouldn't be allowed to use scalp cooling, and it's changed in the last 5 years. There's been a lot change in the last 5 years. Generally speaking, if you've got a solid tumour and you haven't got any underlying kind of health issues, such as, you know, you've got already severe reactions to the cold or something like that, then you should be offered it as a choice. The problem is, depending on where you live in the country, for example, nobody in Ireland gets offered it at the moment at all, unless it's private. Depending around England, some hospitals stopped doing it during COVID and are still not doing it. So I'm always really disappointed to hear that that's not a conversation. And when we do nurse education, we say to our nurses, if it's not appropriate, tell somebody, because otherwise you get to your chemo unit and you see all these ladies having this cold cap and you think, why wasn't I offered? And it can make you feel that like there's some, you've been left out, you've been forgotten, there's something discriminative going on. But quite a lot of the time it's that it might not be appropriate for your cancer type.
Thank you, Jasmine. That's great. Yeah, that explains it. I thought that was probably the case, but it's just one of those. I think at the time you don't think about it because you just kind of get told what's going to happen and you accept it, and you don't have any questions around that. So
Yeah.
I definitely think it's a conversation to be had, even if it's not possible. So no, that's great. Thank you for that. I'm going to hand over to Jenny now. The next question.
Hello, hi Jasmine. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from that last segment. Gosh. So our next question is: for many women, their hair is important for their self-esteem and confidence. What suggestions can you offer our mums to help improve their self-esteem in relation to any hair loss during their treatment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's such an important thing, isn't it? And one of the reasons we founded this charity is because we heard this sentence a lot. People would come and say, either I feel really guilty because I know I should be thinking about my health, but I'm actually really worried about my hair. People would say, oh, I feel really vain. And we always say it's not vanity, it's sanity. It's actually very healthy to care about how we look, you know, and we know that that's important and it does make us feel different. And actually, when you lose your hair, it can also be that label for the treatment that you're going for. And that means conversations you just don't want to have. So some things that so many women have passed on as being really particularly helpful, especially younger women with younger children, for self-esteem. A little bit about planning. So often at the beginning, people assume that a wig will hopefully be the answer. But when you've got, you know, maybe younger kids, or maybe you're pregnant and you're getting hot flushes from all of those scenarios, including your treatment, wearing a wig can be uncomfortable. It can be unpractical if you've got a toddler trying to pull it off all of the time. You know, you're bending down and lifting up kids. So a wig can be great to go and have a look at. But it's really about looking at some alternatives, which I think we're going to look into a little bit later for headwear. So from a self-esteem point of view, some planning can be really important. So thinking to yourself, actually, there will be times when I'm probably going to be hair-free. And what am I going to feel comfortable about? If you have young children as well, what we've learned from lots of mums is, particularly boys actually, around the age of between 6 and 10, they don't want mum to pick them up from school during treatment. And what we've learned is if you can be really repetitive for your child and say, I know I'm bald when I'm around the house, but when I pick you up from school, I will always have on my wig or my baseball cap. It makes such a difference. It's the same for girls as well, but in our research, it's shown particularly with young boys. Girls tend to be more verbal about what they want mum to do, don't they? But young boys can just be angry. So I think for your own self-esteem, it's thinking about often the other people in the family as well and their reactions and how you can support them to feel okay, which ultimately makes you feel better. So I suppose with self-esteem, it's really about having options, and hopefully during the rest of this workshop, we're going to show you what those options might be. And it's about finding things that are tailored for you and just work for you. So I guess it's keeping an open mind on what might be helpful. Has that answered your question there?
It has. Sorry, I think Jenny's frozen. That's why she's not responding.
Oh, no problem. I
No,
was thinking, shall I show you some headwear and ideas to cover up
yes,
along now?
please.
Yeah, shall I do that? So let me grab my box and show you some of the things. So the thing about hair loss as well is, how do you know what you don't know? Well, over at Cancer Hair Care, we've got a tried and trusted directory of suppliers. So for example, things like specialist headwear should be specifically designed to cover up securely the hairline area. So that's the difference between grabbing a beanie hat, which is absolutely fine, or grabbing something which is custom made. It should be well fitted and made for the purpose of, you know, disguising hair loss. Some of the things people haven't heard of are things like this. So this is a hat with hair. So I'm aware obviously that I've got my own hair under here, but I just want to show you what that looks like. So this is just a beanie with a long ponytail. And this can be really great for people when, again, a wig's not working, or, you know, you're with the kids a lot, or this just might just work better for you. They come in loads and loads of different styles. So on the Cancer Hair Care directory, you'll see it says hats with hair. And so, you know, you can just go and have a look through those trusted suppliers, all different hair textures. They've got beanies, they've got caps, they've got headbands with what we call 3/4 wigs. And so for some people, something like this just works better. You know, if you're pushing a pram and you've got another kid and you're going to school and doing the school run or things like that, whatever's helpful for you, or people that exercise often say they wear these sorts of things to the gym. Now, you can get things like this off of Amazon, but again, the reason we often go for trusted suppliers is because things like ponytail on a hat are actually quite heavy. So this is a reinforced beanie. So it's got a security band sewn into it so that that weight just keeps it on your hair head a little bit more, because otherwise, you know, that might slip off. So when we try and test things, that's what you want to look out for. If you sort of see one on Amazon for 20 quid, worth a try, but from a specialist supplier, things like this will be about 50 or 60 pound. That's what you're paying for. You're often paying for a better quality of hair and some kind of reinforcement, so the weight of the hair doesn't pull the hat off. So to give you another example, so this is a cap with hair attached. So again, they come in different textures. You can get kind of dreadlocks, you can get afro hair, you can get all different colors and types. And often if they come longer, you can just cut it shorter or ask a hairdresser to cut it shorter. Let me show you how one of these looks, because sometimes when you've got a cap on with some hair, just going to push that down, it can be really great just to bung a scrunchie in and just have like a side ponytail, something like that. What you want to look out for with caps with hair is the side here. So again, the specialist ones, they include the hair all the way round to the front, as opposed to a cap with hair which might start back here and then you'd have that bare area there. So when you're playing with things like this, you want to try and make sure, you know, if you tuck it behind your ear, that you've got that area around the hairline that's secure, or if you pop it into a ponytail, that you kind of get it in a lowish ponytail. So again, that area, it just feels more secure. So caps and hats with hair can be a really, really great option. So as I said, look on the Cancer Hair Care directory, and we've just literally list hats with hair, and there's a couple of excellent suppliers. Just a couple of other tips as well. So lots of people spend a lot of money on lots of different headwear. And so what we've noticed is, if you look at your wardrobe and you look at your clothes, and rather than matching what you wear on your top half, which I'll show you how to blend that in a moment, perhaps look at what you've got on your lower half. So you might find, you know, springtime, hopefully the sun will come out for us, and you might say, actually, my spring wardrobe, I wear a lot of denim jeans, so that's kind of blue. I don't wear so much black, but I like to wear kind of pastel colours. And that gives you an indication of what type of base headwear colours to sometimes go and get. So for example, I'm wearing sort of teal trousers today. So I've gone for this kind of teal colour. So specialist headwear will frame the hairline. And if you want to go for something simple, across our directory on all those headwear suppliers, look for things that say loungewear, yoga wear, and comfort wear. They tend to just be easy to pop on, have some kind of elasticated back. So if you're resting, you can just kind of, there's no knot there. And it's what we call a beautiful basic layer. And from there, you can kind of jazz things up. So it's still chilly at the moment. So something, for example, like just a knitted headband can be excellent. By the way, folks, those knitters also knit lots of knitted headbands. So if you want something like that, you can always get in touch with the Cancer Hair Care team. I'll tell you about that towards the end as well. So you can add in layers there by putting headbands or scarves or whatever you like to kind of bulk it up. And then there are also things like these. These are fake fringes. So we can't actually find a supplier that makes them with curly hair or afro hair. So if that's a problem and you want one, get in touch with Cancer Hair Care and one of our lovely specialists will hand make that for you. But there are plenty of suppliers that do different types of fringes. So they come in different lengths and different kind of colours and shades and different widths. So this one's a blonde kind of shorter width. This is a wider width. And let me just show you how they look. Now, depending on where you get a fringe from, sometimes they have a Velcro piece that you're meant to sew to the upper inside of your headwear. But lots of people actually say, oh, that doesn't work sewing it in, because then you can only wear it in one item of headwear, and sewing it in gives it away that it's not a real fringe. So get some sticky back Velcro and peel off that sticky layer. And then what you do is you just pop that, stick that into the upper inside of your cap, your headwear, whatever it is. I'm going to go for a bit of a retro angled look there. So I'm going to pop this over to one side here, like hair does. I'm going to move this a little bit lower. So if, for example, you lose your brows, this can be quite good as well. So there you can see we've just got a fringe in the hair, into the inner side of the headwear, and that will just look very, very realistic. You can style it however you like. If you want to pop it further back or you want less of a fringe, you can cut them down, or you can put them much, much further back. So if you just want a little bit of hair. So it's really up to you to kind of use those as you like, and you can play around with false hair however you like. One thing that's really important is do make sure these are stuck in with, like I said, that sticky back tape. I was working with a lovely lady called Anne, who was on our trying and testing panel, because we try and test everything we recommend. And Anne was a very glamorous lady. She always found sparkly headwear. I don't know where she got it all from, but she did. And when she tried and tested a platinum blonde fringe she wanted, so we got her one. She had her glitzy gold kind of beret hat on, and she said, please do tell people when one goes out with one's friend for a posh lunch and one doesn't listen and one did not stick one's fringe in one's headwear, eating pea and ham soup and a fringe that falls into it is not a pleasant experience. So I'm sure we all smile with Anne. She's given us permission to share that story. And the moral of that story is if you wear a fringe, stick it in. So that's how they work, because ordinarily when you get false hair pieces, you clip them into your hair, don't you? So that's why it's really important to know how do you secure that in something if you're completely hair free. So there's loads and loads of ideas. If you're somebody that's wearing headwear for religious reasons or modesty reasons, for example, perhaps you're wearing a hijab, then you can get things like wig grips that you can wear under a hijab, which can help it not to slip. Because often if you're wearing faith-based headwear, you've bought it on the basis of having hair underneath. And so then when you're hair free, you might find that things start to slip. So anything that you want to know about covering up and headwear, you can get in touch with the Cancer Hair Care team. If you've got a special occasion to go to or something like that, there's lots of suppliers out there, but often those suppliers are quite small actually, and they can't afford to do mass marketing. So there's some lovely companies that we've linked you to on our directory, and a lot of those are people that have had a cancer journey themselves and they've started their own businesses making fantastic headwear offers. So that's some of the things that I think can lift self-esteem and give you the confidence to kind of make some choices.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Jenny.
Sorry, thank you, Jasmine. That's really great. I think Sarah's got our next question today.
I have. Can I just quickly go, sorry, Jasmine, I just wanted to ask, in terms of wigs, is there a particular kind of wig that you would recommend more than another? So, for example, I use my experience as an example again. I didn't know about all of the possible headwear that is available, sort of like during hair loss. I had no idea about any of what you've just shown us. And all I had was a very basic wig, and it was so uncomfortable, and I hated wearing it. I used to wear it out and about all the time religiously. When I was in the house, as soon as I got in, it was coming off. And I just wondered if is it worth paying that a little bit more money for a better quality wig? Do you have any kind of advice around wigs?
Yeah, sure. And it's a big question, isn't it? Wigs are such a big subject, aren't they? Because I think before experiencing hair loss, most people's only experience of a wig is like a fancy dress party, those low quality, very itchy wigs. Let's just think that through a little bit, so that depending on where you are in your journey, everybody might get a heads up on what should be available. So if you're being treated by the NHS, the duty of the NHS is to provide you with what we call the provision of a wig. Now, it works very differently across different hospitals. And in fact, you can have a hospital trust or a health board that have 3 or 4 hospitals, and each hospital is operating differently. So first and foremost, you need to speak to your cancer nurse and say, how do I go about getting my NHS wig referral? Now, there's no such thing as an NHS wig. That's a myth. So the NHS don't manufacture and produce wigs. What they do is they outsource it to a wig supplier. So some hospitals might have, for example, a Maggie's or a Macmillan Centre where you make an appointment and the wig supplier comes there, and they operate maybe 1 day a week, and you go and have your appointment and they will show you a range of wigs and then maybe order you in the right wig. Other hospitals, you have to go out to the wig supplier. And for some people, we work in sort of rural Wales, for example, and we know that for some people, that's a 2-hour drive. So it can be a distance. And other places actually say you go and buy your wig and you claim the money back. So it really is very broad across different hospitals. So first and foremost, you need to ask your cancer nurse, how do I get my NHS wig referral? And they should give you information on how you go about doing that. So if you pay a prescription charge, then you might pay up to about £70 towards the cost of that wig. Some hospitals pay it fully. So again, you need to ask, is there any cost involved? So first and foremost, you kind of need to find out how you're going to be supported by your local hospital. Now, when it comes to selecting a wig, a couple of things that are really important. It is essential, and it is the law, that your wig supplier gives you the opportunity to choose a wig which is of a hair texture which feels comfortable for you. And I say this particularly for women of colour and Asian women who, for example, sometimes are asked to just view a range of blonde Caucasian wigs. That's not okay, and the NHS are working very hard to rectify that. So you should feel empowered to ask for a wig in your hair type. That's really important. Now, the type of wig, the availability, the ranges, the quality varies from wig supplier to wig supplier. So it's quite a journey, isn't it, going for a wig? So I think what you have to do is get a bit prepared. And one thing to think about is the transition you're likely to make. So, for example, if you're starting your journey, you've got, shoulder length, longer hair, you want to think about that you are going to become hair free unless you're scalp cooling, and that's appropriate. So if you're going to become hair free, you're going to go through a transition where perhaps you're going to cut your hair shorter, perhaps you're going to clipper it off, thinking about that. And then when you put on hair, you might be putting on your long hair, and that might be absolutely fine. But at some point, you're going to transition into new hair growth, hopefully. And that means that you will have a shorter style. And so many people said, oh, I wish I'd have thought about that when I got my wig. So, for example, an ideal transition might be that you get your hair cut quite short and you get a wig that's quite similar, and that's your short style. When you then come out of your wig and you've got an even shorter style, you can just say, oh yeah, I decided to go for a change. I decided to go for something shorter, and you're not necessarily going from long to short. It might not bother you at all telling people that you're wearing a wig. It might be absolutely fine. So we call it the script, and it's just something to have a think about with that transition. Now, there are so many different types of wigs, but generally speaking, if you're getting your wig through an NHS referral, it'll be synthetic hair. It won't be human hair. Now, the thing about this, folks, to understand is often people think, oh, a human hair wig will be much better. Actually, you have to learn how to blow dry, wash and style a human hair wig. Just like human hair, you can have a bad hair day with a real human hair wig. They're quite a lot of care, actually. So if you've got, a straight bob and it's human hair, it might kink up and frizz up. And it's not as easy to blow dry a wig, even if it's on your hair, as it is your own hair. So do think about that, because actually the range of synthetic hair now is very, very good across a lot of the wig suppliers. You can get, all different colors, different styles. You can get roots, for example, things like that. So it is a myth that human hair wigs are better than a synthetic wig. Now, the inside of your wig is really, really important. So we often say to people, it's really important to get to know the inside of the wig. Let me just see if I can go down below to my little cupboard and see if I can just pull one out to show you what I mean. So what I often say to people is, get to know your wig when you get it, or have a look when you're at your providers at the inside, because you talked about that itchiness. So if you take a wig and you turn it inside out, often there's a label at the back, and at the front, this area here, it will have a kind of horseshoe or a U-shaped area. Now that's the area that's going to sit right here. Now, some wigs have, like this one, have a mesh part or a lace part at the front. And what that means is, if you pop your hand under there and turn it inside out, you'll be able to see your own skin underneath. So when that's on your scalp, you would be able to see your natural scalp coming through in that area. So they're called lace front or mesh wigs, and they're kind of really on trend. And that's the one thing that a lot of people say, oh, I wish I'd known about that because I had this fuzzy area. What it also means is, where it's mesh or lace, it tends to be what we call hand tied in. And that means you get a bit more flexibility with the parting. Whereas If you have something which is more of a weft kind of fabric, what you'll find is when it's wefted on the wig, often, and it looks a little bit like this, or weft fabric can look a little bit it's a little bit rougher to touch. That is often sewn in one direction. So you might think, I really want it to go over to the right, but actually it's sewn into the left. So have a look at the inside of your wig. That can make a big difference. But across the board, a lot of wigs are itchy. Our scalp is very sensitive. So what you can do about that, there's a couple of things that can help with both help a wig to kind of feel secure and for that kind of itchiness. So you can get things called wig caps. Now, wig caps tend to come in, they're a bit like a footsie or the end of a pair of tights. They should come in all different colours. If you have got one of those wigs that shows your natural parting, you probably want to go for colour similar to your own skin type. If not, it's really up to you. Now, with these, the big mistake that people make is they pull them too low. So you'd want it to go underneath your wig where your natural hairline would be. So these are worth a try. You can get them in different fabrics. You can get them in bamboo cotton for about £7. You can get these off of Amazon wig caps that are nylon ones, and you normally get a pack, you get 3 in a pack for £4.99, something like that. But for some people, what can really help is something like this. These are called wig grips, and you can get them 10 a penny from Amazon and places like that, and from wig suppliers. Now, if I hold that a bit closer, you'll see that it's got a cross stitch on it. They come in all different colours, and it's like a velvety texture. It's really simple. It is just a velvet cross stitch headband. And what you do, you open the Velcro and you pop it on. You can get them in silicone as well and in different fabrics. You pop it on either over your hair if you haven't lost your hair yet, you've got hair thinning, scalp cooling, or perhaps you've got new hair growth, or you're hair free. And that texture, the cross stitch and the Velcro, will just grip onto the inside of your wig. And for some people, it just it doesn't lift it off of the scalp, but that small barrier at this area here, where it tends to be really itchy, can make a big difference. If we get a really hot summer, a lot of people find that these work better for them than wearing a full wig cap. So when it comes to itchiness, you need to look at the inside fabric. That's really important. And then you need to, it's a bit of trial and error with wearing different things to get that comfort. I hope that's shed a bit of light around wigs. It is a massive subject, isn't it? It's a really big one to choose a wig. And just remember, when you go to a wig supplier, as long as your wig hasn't been cut, if you get it home and you try it on again and you think, oh, I wish I'd have gone for that shorter red one, you should have the right to change it. Unfortunately, once they've been cut, then they can't change them. But there are some wig banks where you can get some either free or very low cost wigs, and again on the Cancer Hair Care Directory you can have a look at where those wig banks are.
That's great, thank you so much. There is so much more to wigs than I ever knew.
Absolutely.
Again, it's such valuable information as well, because when you are going through it, it's just you just don't know where to begin. So it's just really worth knowing all of that. So that's really useful. Thank you so much. Right, so I will move on to the next question. Okay, so people often associate cancer treatment with hair loss from their head, but may not consider the impact of losing their eyebrows and eyelashes. Could you just talk a bit more about this, please?
Yes, of course. So it can be a bit of shock to people actually. And like you said, people often think about, oh, what am I going to do about the hair on my head? I'm going to have a wig or headwear or what have you. But actually lashes and brows and body hair can be strange to lose. Now, here's the weird thing for a lot of people, and some of you may already be experiencing this. Sometimes all the hair can go on the head, or the majority, but you're left still with some of your brow and some of your lashes, or one side the brow's completely gone and the other side it hasn't. So it's really important to know that that is a normal situation. So often people say, oh my goodness, is my chemotherapy not working? Have I not got a high enough dose? Because surely all my hair would have gone. So no, it's not. I'm not a medical professional, but because of the subject matter, we delve very deeply talking with our cancer nurse specialists and our oncologists. It's not an indicator, folks, that your chemotherapy, for example, isn't working. So for some people, they say, oh, I've still got a bit of lash left. Is it okay to put mascara on or makeup on my brows? Yes, it's absolutely fine. So that transitional journey, when the hair's on the face, the brows or the lashes, of course, it's a very different timing, because that's why our lashes and brows don't grow that long. My goodness, if they grew for up to 7 years or something, we wouldn't be able to see. So they're on a quicker growing phase, and they tend to come out quicker, and then they go through their growing phase slightly slower. So what can happen is, if you're putting on mascara and your hair comes out with it, that hair was already loose. It was right on the edge of the follicle, like we were saying earlier. So it's not your fault. It's not the fact that if you just didn't use mascara, it'd stay in another 2 or 3 days. It might have stayed in another hour because it's right on the edge, but you're not pulling it out. So it's really important to know that you're not doing damage. There's a couple of things that we do and don't recommend when it comes to lashes and brows. So if we think about our brows first, people often ask us about microblading. And if you don't know what microblading is, it's a very lightweight tattooing technique where the person applying it will make tiny little cuts and put in a pigmented colour of your choice. And the way they sweep it, it looks very much like real hairs. So it's called micro small blading, as in they use a blade. However, it's really important to understand microblading. And recently I've been invited to talk to lots of oncology and nursing conferences, where what we're trying to do is say to our medical team, when people ask us about having this treatment, microblading, done, we need to think about when could it be most appropriate. Now, it's not on anywhere by any means as strong as or more as invasive as having a tattoo kind of on your arm or something like that. It's very, very different. We call it a surface level treatment. And that's important to understand, because we wouldn't recommend you have a really invasive tattoo done anywhere on your body during treatment. However, when it comes to microblading, if you are well, and if you've thought through any possible side effects, a lot of people do go ahead and choose to have it done at a time where they're not vulnerable, they're feeling well, and the skin on their face is in good condition. The best practice would be to advise you to have it done before you start your chemotherapy, or around 3 weeks afterwards. But here's the thing. When it comes to empowering women, I think it's about saying you need to make an informed choice. So when we're talking to our lovely medical professionals, we want to say, what is your medical concern? Because for some people, having their brows microbladed on was absolutely essential and did make that self-esteem difference. So we've just reviewed Breast Cancer Now's booklet and Macmillan, so everybody's up to date. We've written about it on our website as well. So it's all about the timing and your vulnerability, because actually when you have it done, it's a very low level surface wound, and it can kind of puff up a little bit as if you've got a minor graze for about 12 hours, but within 24 hours it's often gone completely down. I've worked with lots of women who said they've gone on their lunch break to have their brows microbladed. They've come back and they say they work in an office of, albeit lovely men. They said no one's noticed. They said, you know, my whole brows have puffed up and gone red, and then they've gone down. And because it's on your face, it's normally a very easy place to be aware of and to take care of that area. You normally just put a little bit of cream around the edge and it soaks it up, and then it's well looked after. So that's what microblading is. But of course, you don't have to go to all those lengths, because there can be quite an expense. On average, it's about £350 for a pair, because you want both done. Lots of providers will give you a discount if you tell them that you've had or you're going through cancer treatment. And it will be up to that individual practitioner whether or not they feel confident and comfortable to offer it to you at a time when you choose. But there's lots of makeup you can get. Be warned though, folks, nowadays, because brows are so on trend, you want to read on the packet, because if you want a really full look, you're probably well into your makeup and you know about the types of makeups that actually say they're a bit like microblading, and some of that makeup doesn't wash off for a week. So just look at the pack, because if you put it on and it feels like a marker pen and it's too much, you'll be scrubbing it off for ages. So let me show you a couple of things that can be very, very helpful when it comes to brows. So if you're after creating a more kind of natural brow, it can be really helpful to get something like this, eyebrow stencils. Now, this is a brand called Eyelure, and we've tried and tested these. And the reason we recommend these is because when you buy, an offer off of Amazon, so it might be, for example, they say, oh, 22 different shapes to choose from. Nobody really needs 22 different shapes to choose from. So you get about 4 different shapes in a pack. And this is how they look. I'm going to hold it up to the camera there. So these are just clear and they come with 4 different shapes. And can you see around the edge, there's quite a lot of space around that template. So what that means is you can either sometimes press it onto your skin when you're hair free and it will stick, or you've got room to hold it. Then you can apply your makeup of choice and you just get a nice shape. Again, you choose a shape that feels familiar to you, and then you just flip it and you do the other side. What tends to happen when you order the sheets off of Amazon, you have to cut them up and there's no space to hold it. So you end up with this very fine kind of template and it falls on the floor, and it's just, a bit of a faff and doesn't really do the job. So I'd say go for ones which are slightly better quality. They're about £6.99 for some eyebrow templates. So can be really useful because lots of people say when they've got hair, they can follow the line, but when they're hair free, it's really difficult to get that shape. There's also a really lovely brand of products called ELF, and they're vegan and they're really affordable, about £5.99, and they do a whole range of brow kits. So something to look out for, and again, it's that how do you know what you don't know? You can get these kits called gel kits. Now, it's kind of weird because actually what they're calling a gel is much more like a wax. It's not sticky and wet, so it's not particularly gel-like. But what happens is these come in all different shades and it helps you to create a very natural effect. So the gel, if you like, or the wax base doesn't come out as dark as it looks. So you can apply that on first and then you put powder on the top. And what happens is that waxy jelly base grips onto the powder and it almost creates a kind of textured look. So that's the best way to create a very, very natural looking brow if that's what you're after. So trying out different things, different makeups and different templates can be really helpful. Often people say using a pencil isn't helpful when they're completely hair free. So that's why we often recommend you get those dual kits that have got like a powder in them and some kind of base that you use for your colour. And the other thing about brows that we often get asked is about these. And these are those kind of temporary tattoos. So I don't know if when you were a kid, you ever did them, like a skulls and crossbone or something like that, but they operate just like that, this. And when we tried and tested this, the feedback was really important. So you cut it out and then you would take the transfer and you would use a slightly damp cloth to pat over it, and then you peel it off and it's left stuck onto your face. Now, there's lots of different shapes and sizes and colours, so it is about looking at something that works for you. And you tend to get a couple of sheets for about £11.99. But here's the really important feedback from our panel, and this is why we try and test everything. What our panel said is if you're a kind of makeup-y person and you're really into your makeup and you're completely hair-free, these can work well. And the reason we said that is when you have them on, sometimes there's a bit of a shiny residue around it. And so you need to be able to kind of foundation or powder around that so it looks real. The other thing is they're a bit fiddly. So, panel really fed back. The majority of people in panel said, oh my gosh, that did not work. It was such a faff. I had put my makeup on and then I got it damp. And, it really needs to have a little bit of planning. So it's not something to do in a rush. It's something to practice first. The other thing is, and this is really important, this is why we try and test stuff. When people had got a bit of hair still, they said after a couple of hours, it's like the hair poked through and it was lifting it off. And you don't want that, do you? You don't want that kind of flapping off. So anything new that you try, whether it's your wig, whether it's wearing a fringe, whether it's trying something new with wearing false lashes, we'll look at in the moment, wear it around the house first. Try wearing around the house for at least 4 hours, 8 ideally, and then you won't be stuck in a situation where you think, oh my God, that didn't stay. It wasn't secure. My wig was too itchy. So try things at home first. So that's a few tips for eyebrows. When it comes to eyelashes, there's a couple of things that I think can be really, really helpful. So number one, as long as you haven't got any significant problems and eye infection, it should be fine to wear a good quality brand of false eyelashes. Should be absolutely fine to wear false eyelashes. Now, lots of people find, especially during chemotherapy, that they get very watery eyes. And that is connected with lots of things. It's a common side effect of chemotherapy, but also because you've lost your nose hairs, your brows, your eyelashes, all of which have a function. Often noses can be runny, eyes can be runny, because all of those hairs have a primary function, and that's to protect the eye from debris. So actually there's a good argument or case to say that wearing lashes will actually help to protect your eye, because any dust will soon fall still on those false lashes. Now, what happens if you've not worn false lashes before? There's all different lengths of lashes, from as long as you like to as short and natural as you like. And they come with a glue in them, or they can be pre-glued. So if you get a good quality brand, so this is the Sea Lash, and there's a lovely lady who is on the back of the Sea Lash. I'll hold her up here. She's called Cordelia, and we call her Cody for sure. And she had breast cancer. And it was a total shock to Cody. She was not expecting to lose her lashes. And so she found that she had some sensitivity on her fingertips, which again is common, and she found them too fiddly to put on. So she designed a range with a slightly thicker, what we call band, and that's where you place it on your outer lid. So there's lots of different ranges. Sea Lash has been especially designed by a lady who's had cancer. Isla is a great brand as well, and Boots Own, they've brought out their own range. You know, there's lots of different brands. So as long as you buy a reputable brand and you get some glue, you should be able to get 5 to 6 wears out of a good brand. There's a brand called Flicker. They're not new, but they're relatively new. They're on our directory, and you can actually get about 15 wears out of those. They're a little bit more expensive, so something like this on average is around £6. The Flicker lashes are about £15, and you need to buy the glue separately, but they do wear really, really well. So again, it should be fine to wear them. So when it comes to brows and lashes, the thing to do is experiment a little bit, practice at home, and try different kind of styles to see what works for you. If you've got tiny eyes or you want something really natural, it's okay to cut the width of eyelashes, and often people say they're just too big, they're sticking out the side. Don't cut them when you've glued them on, cut them when they're off of your head. Just give them a snip and line them up and then pop them on. On the Cancer Hair Care website, we've done you a video with a lovely lady called Sarah, who is a young woman when she had her cancer in her 20s, and she shows you some tips on how to put some false lashes on.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jasmine. That's really useful. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask the last question. I think you did touch on this a little bit earlier, Jasmine. Some of our mums have talked about their experience of scalp discomfort during hair loss and their regrowth. Do you have any advice on ways that they could manage this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we talked briefly earlier, I'm just reaching for some items to show you, a little bit about how the scalp can be irritable and itchy. So if you're completely hair-free and you're wondering, how should I look after my scalp? The one thing to say there is keep the scalp clean. And make sure that you don't not wash the scalp. Some people say, oh, I just don't want to wash my scalp at all. The only reason we'd say don't wash your scalp is if you've been instructed to by your medical professionals. So if you're being treated from the neck and head up, you might have been given specific instructions. Don't wash the scalp, do wash the scalp, use this emollient or what have you. That only tends to be about a 2-week instruction. If you've had surgery, radiotherapy, anything like that. So after 2 weeks, you're probably okay to move on to these recommendations that I'm going to make to you now. Now, the thing is, when you're hair-free, what you want to do is identify how is your scalp now. So if you can, make yourself a cup of tea, put some nice music on, sit in a room, and you might like to look at your scalp or you might like to feel it. because often what happens with our hair care regimes, if we have a shampoo we trust and maybe we have coloured hair or we have afro hair or whatever our hair type, but when we're hair free, what we're looking at is how is the scalp. Now, bizarrely, during treatment, some people find that they used to have psoriasis or eczema or dandruff, and it can completely disappear during treatment. Not for everybody. That can be quite unusual if you've got a very specific scalp issue. So how is your scalp now? And then we want to do a regime which is appropriate. So if you've got actually not really any issues with your scalp, it's not particularly painful, and the skin feels okay, it might be just enough to use a nice warm flannel and to just wipe your scalp over, either using a little bit of shampoo in water, or a face wash is ideal if it runs into the eyes, and to just mildly wipe your scalp with a flannel might be just enough to keep that scalp clean. I would say at least 50% of people say that their scalp is irritable and can be a bit painful. So a great ingredients to look out for is tea tree oil. Now, there's lots of debates around essential oil. So generally speaking, with tea tree oil, it's better to get it diluted already. So if you buy a tea tree shampoo and it's a natural product, that tea tree essential oil is already diluted. If you buy a face wash or anything like that, then it's diluted. When it's not diluted is when you get tea tree just in a bottle. Now, if you haven't got any open wounds or anything like that, often a qualified aromatherapist will say it can be safe to just dab a tiny bit on to help with itching. But if you're under any concerns, then buy a product, like I said, like a tea tree facial wash is ideal. And what you can do is you can either use your oil or your face wash, get a really warm basin of water, put a few drops in, or squeeze in your face wash or your shampoo, for example. Get yourself a lovely soft flannel. So not one of those ones that you've had in the airing cupboard for years. I'm not really sure why has anyone else got old flannels in the airing cupboard? They can be good for something I'm going to tell you about in a moment. But to begin with, if your scalp's just a bit irritable, get your nice soft flannel, drop it straight in that water, wring it out, and then you've got that lovely steamy aroma of tea tree, and pop that onto your scalp. And just do that a few times, and that will cleanse your scalp. Now, the reason that we talk about tea tree is it's one of the few essential oils that's what we call pharmaceutically level tested. If you've ever had athlete's foot or something like that, you might have bought a product with tea tree oil in it. During COVID, it sold out worldwide because it was the most common used natural ingredients in kind of hand sanitations. Let me explain what the said qualities are. So it's antibacterial, antifungal, and antiseptic. And the antiseptic element's really important because that's a localized painkiller. It helps to control that itching, and that's why it's commonly used in antifungal treatments. It's actually used in eye treatments. Never put it neat in your eye, folks. I'm not suggesting that here, but it's really interesting to know that it's an active ingredient, so it has an active quality to it. So you can also, say you've used that flannel on your scalp to cleanse your scalp, say you've got a wig, you can just scooch it around the inside of the wig as well, or your headwear, to get rid of the day's oil secretions, and that can keep your headwear nice and fresh. If your scalp's a bit scaly, now I'm not talking about if it's scaly following radiotherapy, because that might need some separate attention. But if it's a bit scaly, which is common, that's when you want to go and get that slightly rougher flannel, because actually you can drop that in that warm water and very gently just try to gently exfoliate away that skin. Sometimes people have something that we kind of call chemo cradle cap. And if you've got young kids and they've ever had a cradle cap, it's a bit of an anomaly cradle cap actually. But basically it tends to be kind of a bit oily and kind of maybe a bit yellowy and kind of big flakes of skin on the scalp. And what you can do is you can use a good quality oil, maybe a bit of coconut oil or jojoba oil or an argan oil, rub that on those areas, leave it on for a few hours or overnight, and then get that slightly damp but rougher flannel and exfoliate it away. So these are all safe ways to look after the scalp. And that's one of the things, isn't it? There's so many myths, what's safe, what's not safe. It's absolutely fine to interact with your scalp. Now, if you want to moisturize it, one of the things that we've tried and tested and found works really, really well is aloe vera gel. You can get plain aloe vera gel. This one has tea tree in it, and it's the #1 recommendation where people come back and say, oh, that was so nice on my scalp. It soothed the irritation. It really moisturized my scalp nicely. And here's why. Aloe vera gel sinks into the skin much better because bizarrely, even when you're hair free, you've got those hair follicles. And that's why the skin on our scalp is very different from the skin on our face. So it's often much tighter. And people find that when they use their face moisturizers on their scalp, it goes all sticky. So aloe vera gel, or if it's a bit irritable, aloe vera with tea tree in it is great. If I won the lottery, I would send these to everybody. This would be my go-to product. And just to make you rest assured, as I was pointing to earlier, we have a fully independent panel. We have a product recommendation policy. No one can buy our recommendation. We have user testers and our experts looking to everything from a current safety through to, what really works, what does what it says on the tin. So yeah, this is one by a company called Aloe Pura. It's an organic aloe vera gel. It's about £6.99, and you can get them in your local health food shops, for example, that sell cosmetics, and Holland and Barrett. We love a bit of Holland and Barrett because they've got, great naturally kind of tested products. So that's the number one thing to kind of use on the scalp. Let's think a little bit about new hair growth, because that's another quite big topic. And just at this point, it's worth me saying I've written a book which is free of charge. You can download it from the Cancer Hair Care website, and I go into all of these topics. We also have an information website, so you can go on to information, and every single one of these topics is covered quite vastly. So if you kind of thinking, oh, I want a bit more, I'm not at new hair growth, I'll go and look at that when I'm ready. You can download that book, or you can go on the website, watch the videos, and kind of get all the information there. So here's some key things about new hair growth. So has anyone heard of chemo curls? That's kind of a common thing. Yes, there's a couple of nods. So chemo curls is a real thing, and I'm going to explain how it might happen. So our natural hair texture, whether our hair is straight, wavy, curly, or one of those amazing variants of afro hair. And I say that because afro hair isn't one thing, is it? Or you might have mixed heritage hair. So your natural texture of hair, that shape, is formed in the upper middle part of your follicle underneath your scalp layer. So if you've got straight hair, your hair grows out of a tube, a bit like a penne pasta or a toilet roll, and it grows out of a cylinder which is straight, produces straight hair. If you've got wavy or curly hair, your friends might know this, but you're slightly twisted. It's slightly twisted in the upper middle part, and so it grows out and forms a wave or a coil or a curl. If you've got a variant of the amazing afro texture, then what happens is it's very condensed and it starts almost like a zigzag until it forms that variant in texture. So it's formed in the follicle area. So chemo curls is something that we think occurs for some people who have straight hair before and their hair grows back curly. Why does that happen? So the theory behind this is that every one of those follicles has got a muscle attached to it and it holds it up. So if the internal structure is straight, then that muscle is holding it up at a certain point where it's formed. There's also genetics obviously involved in all of these things, but we think for some people it slightly collapses, the follicle collapses, and therefore the new hair grows out of a twist and produces what we call a chemo curl. Now, for a lot of people, they sometimes love their chemo curls or don't know how to deal with them, but a lot of people like them. And it's strange, after about 18 months, it can go straight. And we don't really know why that happens. So if you've got straight hair, your hair might grow back curly. But just the thing about chemo curls is it's not that chemotherapy is left in the hair. So some people say, oh, I hate those chemo curls. It's got chemotherapy in it and it makes the hair curly because it's full of chemotherapy. That's not the issue, folks. In fact, we understand that chemotherapy exits the hair, the body really quite soon after chemotherapy. I'll explain your timelines on things growing back in a minute. But basically, often hair comes back a bit patchy, and after chemotherapy, the colour takes a while to establish. So all of those things can take a while. So with chemotherapy, we expect within about 3 months, everyone's have what we call a fuzzy peach layer of at least 1 centimetre of hair. That is the normal process of things. For For some people, that's patchy. Some people find that, the neck hair grows quicker than this is the slowest growing area for females. Very, very frustrating. But we expect that hair to start to reboot. And everywhere that hair grows on the body, the first 3 months, it's all going on in the follicle under that skin layer. So that's really normal. So what happens then is between 3 to 6 months, that's when most people say, oh, now I know what texture my hair is, what color it is. It just takes time and a bit of length before it feels more familiar. And then for most people, around 9 months, that's when they say, actually, I feel like my crown and the top and the sides is filled out enough for me to have a short style. Now, folks, our hair grows at all different rates. So you're definitely going to meet someone in the treatment centre that's got twice as much hair as you, and that's really frustrating, but nothing's gone wrong. If you contacted us at around month 4 or 5 and said, no, I've really got patches that have not grown back, I don't have that fluffy peach layer, we would then start to say, okay, let's drill down into that with you. It may just be slow. If you've gone on to hormonal treatments quite soon and that they have a side effect of hair thinning, that might delay the new hair growth. The number one thing for younger women to look into is your iron levels, especially if you've recently given birth or you've got young children, your iron levels. So during treatment, they're going to be checked out all the time. However, sometimes your iron levels have gone really low and your oncologist is fine to give you treatment, but when it comes to hair new growth, we're concerned about that. So that can be important. If you've got a problematic new hair growth, sometimes we'll be saying you need to go back and get an iron test, but we'll drill down into that with you. For most people, it's a bit frustrating. It takes time, but it comes back. 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. They're your kind of checks and measures. However, with chemotherapy, we expect it to start growing pretty soon. But with radiotherapy, it can take up to 9 months to see any hair at all. And that's because sometimes that follicle is completely eradicated away. Whereas with chemotherapy, most of the time it's still in place and we're just waiting for it to reboot and the root to re-establish. But sometimes with radiotherapy, it's eradicated away. And unfortunately, radiotherapy can cause something that we call scarring alopecia, which means that the hair won't grow back in that area. If there's no hair growing back after 18 months, that's the measure, and that does mean permanent long-term hair loss in that area. When it comes to hormonal treatments and things like that, once you stop those treatments, then the hair starts to reboot again. Around 3 months it takes. That's your average time for the follicle to kind of boot itself, and then the hair usually starts to thicken up. So if you've recently had a baby, you could liken that to postpartum loss. That tends to be kind of very much like around the front or the mass of hair. You feel that the hair's thinning and it's hormonally related. So you might be able to relate to that kind of hair loss situation. But what can you do? What can you do? And my goodness, there are so many products out there, aren't there, folks, that promise to grow quicker, grow faster, grow longer. So, of course, when we get in touch with product companies, they get a little bit worried about those types of claims. So the first thing to say, there's no such thing as an absolute promise in a bottle, but there's some great ingredients and there are things that can be helpful. So what we're doing is we're looking to provide an ideal platform for new hair growth. That's what we're looking to do. So let's think about what can be helpful. So number one, gently massaging the scalp is helpful because when you have good circulation, you bring that nutrients and oxygen back to the follicle. So this is a silicone scalp massager, and silicone scalp massagers are the kind of safest ones to use. They're better than using those kind of metal ones which are a bit scratchy on the scalp. So a silicone scalp massager is a really great way of massaging the scalp. Or, when you're watching your Netflix and sitting on your sofa, that person that says, what can I do for you? They could stand behind you and give you a small scalp massage. That might be quite nice. So if you ask me what's ideal, I would say either using your fingertips, which is fine, or a scalp massager, go around the scalp about 3 to 5 times. If you could do that a couple of times a day, that helps to bring that circulation to the scalp. That would be lovely. Not completely necessary, but that would be a way to create that ideal platform. And then there's a very interesting ingredient. So if you start to look at remedies for hair thinning or suggestions to help cultivate new hair growth, often the essential oil of rosemary comes up. Now, folks, unlike tea tree oil, please do not go and buy this and use it neat. So it's not really a good idea to go and buy rosemary oil at all, unlike tea tree, which is much safer. Instead, look for products where it's already in. It will be safely diluted. So, for example, there's a great brand called Faith in Nature. And their products are kind of paraben and sulfate free, and they do a rosemary shampoo and conditioner. And it's great for all hair types, whether you've got straight hair, curly hair, afro hair, whatever your hair texture. These are really great. And they have inside them a really lovely amount of natural rosemary essential oil. You have to be a bit careful because it's better to go for the more natural based products, because we're not looking for a false fragrance of rosemary. We're looking for the benefits, the said benefits of rosemary essential oil. And they're a little bit similar to tea tree. So they're antifungal and antibacterial, and also they help to create a really good equilibrium on the scalp, because sometimes when new hair comes back through, the scalp can kind of kickstart and become overly oily. That's a common thing. So it will help to regulate that. But the main reason that rosemary is used is because of its circulation properties. So it's said to be stimulating. So I always say, with that said quality, if you could see it in action, it would be ping, ping, ping on the follicle, bringing the blood and kind of, again, trying to cultivate that ideal platform. And the thing about rosemary is you only need a low level of it to kind of be active on the scalp. So that's what rosemary is said to do. And that's why we recommend Faith in Nature Rosemary Shampoo and Conditioner. The conditioner also is a really nice texture. So it's not a wax-based conditioner, so it's not too heavy. And often on new hair, if you haven't got that much hair, people say, well, why would I bother using a conditioner? If your scalp's a bit irritable, you don't have to use a shampoo when it's short. You could just use a conditioner and do what we call a conditioning wash. So you damp your hair down, you get a little blob of conditioner, emulsify it, rub it between your hands, and then you kind of massage it like you would your shampoo and just rinse it off. And that often is a conditioning kind of cleanser. It's enough. And it will take off the day's kind of grease and grime, if you like, off of your scalp. So that's worth a try as well. The other thing you can do with this conditioner is you can towel dry your hair, and you can forget its conditioner and use it as a bit of a styling product. So often people say, oh, I'm finding waxes are too heavy, gel's too thick, too much, a pomade's still too heavy, it makes it all go flat. So discard this as a conditioner, pretend it's a styling cream. You towel dry your hair, you get a tiny dab, like half of a little fingernail amount, tiny, tiny amount. Rub it between your fingertips and then just kind of scrunch it on or texture it on and let that dry in. And people are often amazed at how that just gives a really nice kind of texture, just takes away the fluffiness. So if your hair is curly, you can scrunch it in a bit. So have a play with that. It can be really, really good way of just keeping that lovely rosemary on the scalp for a while and just getting a bit of texture with a low level styling product. The other product that tests really, really well, you might not have come across this before. It's by a company called Veleda, and it's a hair tonic. It's a rosemary hair tonic. Now, if you've never used a tonic before, it's a bit weird. When our panel tested it, they said, is it just water? So it's a bit like, how men use aftershave and they splash it on? It's a bit like that. So you can put a few drops directly on your scalp and just massage it in, or you can put a few drops on your hand and massage it in. But unlike an oil or something like that, you don't feel it. It's not sticky, but it's ideal because it's putting that revitalizing rosemary straight onto the scalp, and it doesn't interfere with hairstyling. So for example, if you've got hair thinning or if you've got scalp cooling, it's a really goodie to use to kind of stimulate the growth, but at the same time, it's not going to be like an oil slick on your hair. So that's a really good recommendation. And then last couple of things about new hair growth. So we're often asked, when is it safe to colour new hair and use chemical treatments? So the thing about colouring hair that's really important to understand is it's often about doing what we call a sensitivity test. That's one of the key things. Now, generally speaking, if you're not working with a specialist, because a specialist may be able to look at your hair and say, actually, you've got just over a centimetre and I'm happy to put a semi-permanent on it. But if you're doing it yourself or you're working with a regular hairdresser, the best practice is to have at least an inch of new hair growth that's stable, so it's not still falling out, that your scalp is in good condition, there's nothing odd going on. We're not worried about oily scalps, we're not worried about dandruff, we are worried about any open wounds or sores. You've got about an inch of new hair growth, it's stable, hair's not falling out, scalp's okay, no big issues, and the hair is of a reasonable quality. And the reason we say that is at an inch long, it may not be super duper, but you wouldn't want it to be super dry or something like that. And you do the manufacturer's recommended sensitivity test, then you're good to go. What we say is avoid harsh products if you can. So avoid bleaching. If you want to have your hair bleached, you really need to wait until you've got about at least 2.5 to 3 inches. But if you're colouring hair using permanent colours, for example, to cover grey, you should be fine to go ahead as long as you use the best quality you can and use a product that's at the least harsh it can be. So if you don't need to use a permanent, use a semi-permanent. There are a couple of brands that are more naturally orientated. You still got to do a sensitivity test for the majority of them. So Herbitint is a really, really good home brand. So if you choose to colour your hair yourself, Herbitint have got the kind of henna ranges, which are very, very natural, but they're strong colours. So I always bring up henna because people often say, oh, I'll henna my hair. If you've got short hair and you henna it, it might be a very bright colour. So sometimes with your more natural orientated hair colorants, you get a really bright effect. So if you're not sure about how to go about that, have a consultation with a hairdresser. You can come and speak to the Cancer Hair Care team. We make recommendations all of the time. It's about getting those shades correct and picking the best quality colorant that you can for yourself. When it comes to relaxing hair or perming hair, any other type of strong chemical treatments, you want to wait for about 2.5 inches of hair so that the hair really is in good enough condition, whereas we can colour it about an inch. But for relaxing hair, perming hair, those kind of structural breakdowns, you really need the hair to be in very good quality. Otherwise, you're going to likely to cause some damage to the structure of the hair, which you'd want to avoid with new hair growth. So folks, there's so much information, isn't there? I hope it's been helpful and that, you feel like you've picked up a few nuggets of information along that way. Are there any more subjects or questions that have come in the chat that you wanted to unpick?
Wonderful. Thank you, Jasmine. And there are a few questions that have come in on the chat, but I think I'm going to stop the recording now just in case any more come in. So I just want to say a huge thank you before we stop the recording for answering all our questions. So many amazing recommendations and advice today. So thank you. And I hope anybody who's watching the recording finds this session helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for watching.